And so today is our first meeting within the pro-social space within the design school. So we do have a topic picked out, and I'm thinking that we're going to be meeting bi-weekly moving forward, and we want it to be very the topics for each meeting to be within pro-social, but dependent on what's emerging within the design school. So a lot of our talks are going to be based on things that have been happening, needs that people who arrived to this space might bring from one week to the next. So I would like to start out by doing some check-ins. And within your check-ins, if you could also just let us know how familiar you are with Prosocial, like you have a fairly good understanding of it, the core design principles, that rings a bell, or you've never heard of the core design principles, or psychological flexibility. I think that can help kind of set the tone for this conversation. I'm pretty sure that everybody here is familiar with it, but I just want to make sure that I have a good understanding of any background knowledge that I might have to provide. So I can start out with our check-ins. I was with Brad and Gwen earlier in our really good campfire. I had to leave a little bit early, but we were sharing just the importance of relationships and juggling, how we arrived at this space, and how we bring others into the fold, and how we manage everything in our lives. And I thought that really resonated with me, and I've been sitting with that ever since the campfire today. So I'll pass it on to Gwen. If you want to go next.
Yeah, I have, I just got off a really interesting webinar with Herb Simmons. Does that name ring a bell? He wrote a climate vocabulary for future something, I forget. But really good stuff. And I'm gonna get that book and see what's in there about pro-social stuff. Because I'd like to see how different people are articulating these pieces and getting on to the same stuff. Because I feel like, the pro-social stuff has, how we interact together as human beings has like been around for as long as human beings. But there's, different terms that people are putting to things. So it's just, it's really interesting to get more familiar with that. So looking forward to this too. Thanks, everybody. Chad?
Hello, everybody. In terms of pro-social, I've read the book. I have it over here. My level of knowledge falls short of a training or a deep study, but I also have a acquaintance with the foundational fields that are informing it, and with ER in the design school, I've also gotten exposure to in practice, and I'm looking to deepen my own understanding of what that means, and how to do that in a not a pedagogical way necessarily, but in a way that instructs practice. Let's see. Yeah, and then also thinking about what that means to for my sort of local efforts around figuring out how do you draw like beings into the sphere of social to be even like to be ready to go coherent into something, like who are they, and identifying the networks in order to make a container possible. That's where I'm sort of sitting with here locally. Yeah, and then Joe, your comment on the evolution of sociality as being more than human struck me too, just now deeply. There was a big thunderstorm that came through last night with all sorts of lightning, and I went out and I was feeling into the power of it, and I could enter this mindset where like the essence of the mind that wanted to control that and master it, and it was profoundly antisocial. Yeah, really interesting. And then figuring out what like the evolution as a supremely powerful mechanism that doesn't care about your values, but your values can steer it. So that's sort of the game, right? And yeah, and thinking about it as a channeling and guiding of that process, really important. Yeah. And I guess Brad.
Great, thanks. Hey, nice to be here. Just picking up my kids up from school, and then once I get into the science museum, I'll be able to listen in. And yeah, really enjoyed the meeting with Anna earlier, and just really feeling like there's just a progression of my knowledge and what's happening, and then overlaid with trying to do this welcoming group. So I think that this Prosocial and tomorrow's Prosocial is really going to help me kind of have a framework. So that's, yeah. Thank you. I don't know who's next. Somebody else go.
Me?
Jenny,
Okay.
would you like to go?
I would say my knowledge of prosocial has been called into question in the last 24 hours.
So it's just a deeper level, that's all.
So like with the evolutionary science side, which is not really talked about in prosocial world, and now I'm learning about that, and sort of my mind is like, what so I think I have a lot to learn, and I feel I did do the facilitator training and have the book and all of that stuff. So I'm familiar with the core design principles and the behavioral science part of it, but really the evolutionary science part I'm not familiar with as much until now. And so that's kind of how I am too. I'm just sort of like thinking in these I'm thinking philosophically at the moment in broad contexts, and how do we actually evolve humanity to the level we need to. So I'm thinking a lot about that and writing some things down. It's a stimulating place for me. I'll pass to
Yeah, I would say I have pretty advanced knowledge of prosocial, including watching its formation and helping to evolve the way that it's taught. And one of the things that I think there are two key things I've seen as underdeveloped in the way that it's generally understood and taught. I mean, three, if you want to have that anthropogenic myopia that I mentioned, but one is a proper understanding of complexity and emergence, and just how powerful it is to fully embody insights from complex systems, which is about embodiment and complexity together. And then the other is, because my entry point into prosocial as a body of knowledge was through the Evolution Institute and then into cultural evolution. I think that the kinds of questions I want to help other people understand are more about, because it's really hard to create properly functioning prosocial contexts when people are being nice and it undermines purpose, and toxicity can occur and people think they're being prosocial and they're actually undermining and destroying the efficacy of a group, which we saw a lot of in Earth Regenerators, where people could weaponize prosocial sentiments, people could lose track of purpose, people could think that everyone feeling good is what it means to be prosocial. Things that are sort of like at one level, not necessarily wrong, because oftentimes they're right, but in particular contexts, they can be dangerous. And so there's a need for a much richer understanding. And so just to name, for example, the need for us to have really good efficacy and moving toward our goals when we're doing things like trying to fund landscape leaders or other things where the purpose is timely and the consequences are significant, then what we'd consider pro-social behavior would be context dependent. And so, and I've seen the absence of that in a lot of people. So, so I'm hoping that here we can develop a deep embodied practice of pro-social. And since I am starting to teach cultural evolution, I mean, if you talk to David Sloan Wilson within pro-social world, you'd get healthy doses of evolutionary theory. He just isn't sort of leading the cultural aspects of what's taught, which is much more Paul. It just, if you want to like be sort of reductionistic, the majority of the pedagogical focus of pro-social trainings has come from Paul. And I love Paul, and Paul's wonderful, but it's also limited. And so, so these other things are just like good compliments. So I hope we can bring it all in. And yeah, so back to you, Anna.
Did Gwen go though?
Yeah, Gwen went.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And I think that the way you put it, what's coming out of pro-social world is a good way to put it, because when you first mentioned that evolutionary science doesn't really come out as much from pro-social world, so my role within pro-social world has been primarily in Prosocial Commons, which is a project that David started. So he brings a lot of people into the Prosocial Commons that follow him because of their interest in evolutionary science. My background is in behavior. I really had no concept of evolutionary theory beyond genes before joining Prosocial and learning more about what evolutionary theory truly is. But I do think that the people who are in Prosocial Commons, there is a high value placed on the evolutionary science part, sometimes even beyond really the psychological flexibility and the behavior, the behavioral portion of it. So it's interesting how different parts of this can be focused on based on what silo you're coming from, but together it is really important to be integrating everything. So I'm also hoping to be learning from everybody here. So while I have been working for the past 6 months with Prosocial World on a part-time basis, and I have also taken the facilitator training, I am also always learning as well. So you know, I'm really excited to see how this develops within the design school. And I think that one of the things that we can do is really start to develop some of the structures that we can have in place and have a common culture and a common understanding of what it is we want to be expecting from other people in the design school, and how we want to be responding to them. That's one of the things that is very behavioral within Prosocial, is this idea of identifying behaviors that are helpful, unhelpful. We want to set up systems of monitoring, and we want to set up systems that of how we should be responding to encourage and discourage helpful and unhelpful behaviors. So I did create a survey that I shared with the DS Fund group. So I don't know if I don't think so. Gwen is not part of the DS Fund group, so nobody here has seen this yet. But I am sharing it in the chat that this is something that I want to be sharing with the broader design school. And it's essentially identifying behaviors that we find to be helpful, that are central to our core mission as and values as the design school, as well as behaviors that can undermine that purpose and vision that we have as a collective. So we don't have to fill this out now, but I wanted to start the discussion of what we see as our purpose and what are some of the behaviors that we see as potentially being helpful towards that purpose. So specifically, the prompt that I had put in this survey was, what behaviors would you like to see in your ideal group? What do you think is most important to make a group stronger, more resilient, and effective? And what behaviors from others have you experienced in the past that evokes engagement and cooperation? So it is a little bit different than focusing on the values right now, but this forum stemmed from a place of tension that we experienced within the DS Fund, where a member was engaging in behaviors that was harmful to us moving forward and harmful to the trust within the group. So that's where we started saying maybe we should start identifying these behaviors very explicitly, so that we can start calling them out and identify what are the behaviors that we want to be seeing within our group members, that can foster more trusting relationships between each other.
Yeah, there's one thing I'd love to add in, which is that the answers to these questions really do shift depending on the group and the purpose. For example, everyone being heard, saying that's something I value in an ideal group, may be pretty irrelevant in an emergency response group. And so it's just recognizing that helpful and unhelpful behaviors are also significantly constrained and guided by purpose of the group. And so, so that's just an interesting aspect of exploring what are helpful and unhelpful behaviors in the design school, which would be answered differently in different contexts. And so, I like the idea of exploring it in general, and also like what are helpful and unhelpful behaviors during a webinar, during a campfire, in a design school leadership council exchange, in a decision-making process about a budget, in explorations of approval or considerations of a proposal to the design school fund, that they'll actually be different, even if there are going to be broad similarities in some of the norms. So I just wanted to name that piece in to say that we don't need like one size fits all necessarily, but starting in general is a good place to begin, but that they will be different depending on the context.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like that thing about purpose is kind of key to even be able to start with the question, like, what's the purpose of the design school? You know, I guess as like, if we're going to do like a broad,
Mm-hmm.
and then because then that would tell us like if the design school's purpose was just to teach it was like, depending on the purpose, helpful would be different, you know, like if we didn't have, you know, the one part of the design school where we're very intentional about that the being on the ground is the most important part, like the bioregional work on the ground is the key and the foundation. So then an unhelpful behavior might be that just like not doing anything on the ground and just philosophizing online or something, you know, it's like that kind of a thing. If we don't know the purpose, then how do we answer this question, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so actually maybe I should back up a little bit then, because I'm actually thinking it probably would be helpful if we all did a matrix together. And I'm not sure if Gwen or if Brad have experience doing the matrix, or Chad, I know that you said that you have read the book, but I'm not sure if you've actually done a matrix with a group of people before. But I can pull that up real quick, because I think that us clarifying the purpose of the school and how we're showing up as a collective would be helpful.
We should go look at the purpose statement.
So this is, and I'm thinking, I don't have it set up in the Miro board. So, cause sharing Miro can sometimes be a little bit difficult. So I was thinking that we could essentially just have an open discussion around this for right now, to just kind of become more familiar with the matrix rather than adding to it. And that can be in future meetings where we actually start to develop a collective matrix. But Gwen and Brad, have you ever seen this tool before? I can't see you. But so one of the things that we focus on within the matrix would be our collective purpose, what behaviors we engage in that move us closer to our purpose, what thoughts and feelings get in the way and hook us and move us away from our values, and then what behaviors we engage in that move us away from our values. So I'm wondering if we could just start out by talking about the values of the design school, like what is most important to us as a group in the design school. And then from there, we can discuss the behaviors that are most helpful to move us towards the towards those values. Actually, I'm realizing that this exact collective matrix is referring to the different principles too. So this would be, hold on one second.
I was wondering what those were referring to.
You know what? I'm gonna pull up Miro because I think I still have a blank one that works well for this.
And I think while you're pulling it up, we can at least start exploring the question a little bit. And one way that I find helpful to start exploring the matrix is through tensions, like the tension between something that I want to see happen and something else that might be happening, to reveal what's important or what's getting in the way, and then pull the pieces apart a little bit. So like wanting to do work that's regenerating the earth. So saying, oh, well, what does that mean? Well, one thing it might mean is connecting to land. And it's like, well, if we're on Zoom calls all the time, then we're never connecting with land. There's a tension. And so noticing things like that to try to get at what is really the purpose, because it may be something more specific. It might be like, well, it's to connect with other people that I can mobilize resources with, or that I can not feel alone as I'm going about the work, or, you know, it starts to reveal more clarity about why I might have stayed in a tension that seems contradictory, but it's actually not, because there was a more specific motivational purpose in the moment. And so I find that sort of thing helpful for me in this as a just part of the way that it's used. There are a lot of ways to use the matrix. It's actually a very elegantly flexible tool. But if we say if the purpose of the design school is to create regenerative bioregions, well, that is actually hard to connect to concrete behaviors. So then we have to look at vignettes of our experiences to get at them a little bit more closely. And then we see how we'd want to behave in the design school. So I just wanted to name that as a noticing, something I notice in my use of the matrix, is trying to get to an articulation, because sometimes it's not easy to figure out how to articulate what is actually the purpose, or what is the motivation, or what is the desired thing. So just adding that in.
Do you want us to start throwing out things that we feel like should be in that purpose area, or thoughts about that, or wait until you get your matrix up, Anna?
I have it up right now. Okay. So can you all see this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a general matrix, and so this is on Miro, which allows us to put sticky notes on. And I do apologize. I'm gonna create my, our own Miro board for this, so that in the future, and perhaps I'll upload a video of how to use Miro too, because it isn't the easiest thing to just jump right into, but it is very helpful when everybody has access to the sticky notes that they can place on the board. But this is the board that would start with what matters most to us as a team, what shared values and aims should we hold to, or what do you think our mission and vision is as a community? And then the other questions move on from there. But this one, we can start with the first one. So what matters most to us as a team, what shared values and aims should we hold to? Or what do you think our mission and vision is as a community?
I would say the actual regeneration of the earth.
Yeah, she's emphasizing the word actual.
Yeah.
I heard it in your tone.
I was thinking the same thing, Penny.
It's like, are there more fish in that stream or are there not?
Yeah.
Is the water more contaminated or is it
Yeah.
not?
I don't know exactly how to articulate this, but and if I should keep this in the first person or not, but I'll do that just to start with. Evolving myself as a landscape leader capable of serving my bioregion.
So yeah, if we want to think of that in terms of us as the design school, because that would be more of a singular person. So if we're sharing that as a purpose amongst all of us, it would probably be something like building capacities of landscape leaders.
Yeah, perfect.
Which I think something that can get a little bit confusing with the matrix is thinking about values versus behaviors. So and I guess that's I'll back up again. So you can see the matrix is divided into quadrants, where the lower two quadrants are our inner thoughts and feelings, are things that people can't see. The top two quadrants are our outer actions, or things that people would see us doing. So building capacities of landscape leaders might be a behavior that moves us toward our values. But what is it that our values are they are in a lot of ways compass directions of what we're moving towards. What are things that we hold that we can never achieve, but that we're constantly trying to move towards? And these can be more abstract. They tend to be within us rather than actual behaviors that we're engaging in on the ground. So it's a little bit nuanced, and at the end of the day, it's not terribly important that we separate them very clearly, because a lot of times the behaviors that we are engaging in are also going to be leading us towards our values, but something like this would be what leads us towards actual regeneration of the earth.
Yeah, I was thinking of things that matter to us in the mission and the vision that are more at the values level, are like pragmatism, outcome oriented, making a difference. And so things that are getting more at like the things that are driving the behaviors are things that work. I would also add truth as another one, like what's actually happening, or truth and reality matter, because I've been in plenty of groups because I've been in groups earlier this year where people cared much more about health of relationships than truth or reality. Like, I don't care who's right or wrong. I just want everyone to feel okay, which to me is devaluing of what's real. So I'd say what is real is a really important part of the mission and purpose of the design school. I think that's most visibly expressed through collapse awareness and state of the planet. And then on the other side, what actually works for doing regeneration. It's sort of those sorts of things.
I think one thing I might add is when this making a difference thing, but sort of like the underlying motivation to want to be in service to the continuation of life. So like the motivate, I don't know what that would be called, but the internal, like, this is how I want to live. I want to live in service to life, and then that causes behaviors, or to act in service to life.
Are you saying that we could be doing this work with a fatalistic posture be like, okay, we're just going to do our best, but we know it's all going to hell. Or we could do this work with, I'm committing myself to a life affirming vision of the future where life goes on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so Gwen, that's actually what you're referring to is there. So there's the toward side of the matrix and also the away. So the right two quadrants are toward. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as thriving. What are the things that make us thrive? Versus away, which is referring to things that are focused on surviving. So more of a, we're just, sorry, I'm getting a lot of buzzes on my phone. Just needed to turn it off for a second. Behavior, thoughts and behaviors that are adaptive in ways that only focus on our survival. So those can be more detrimental to our mental capacities, but we still have to engage in those things as well in order to survive. So if you are thinking, what thoughts and feelings might hook me or get in the way of moving towards our values, it might be that, what was the terminology that you said? That
like a fatalistic approach as opposed to more of a life affirming generative approach.
Mm-hmm. So fatalism, it doesn't really matter. It's the end of the world. That can be seen as something that could potentially get in the way of your values. But you can also be responding to it in a way that is adaptive, but it's more focused on, we're just surviving, right? We're not really over here and we're thriving and we're being positively reinforced by our thoughts and feelings and moving towards what's important to us. It's more so we're just trying to get away from these negative thoughts and feelings over here.
Yeah, I'd love to add a couple more to the away side. One is hopium.
Mm.
And the idea that we just distract ourselves with false hope to ignore reality. And then connected as greenwashing and techno-optimism. Because those are things that in the environmental movement really get in the way of us doing something that makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I'd probably put anthropocentrism or human-centeredness. It's another one we want to get away from, because that gets in the way of really being able to do regenerative work. There are a lot of false friends in the regenerative movement that fit in those spaces, or in the environmental movement in general.
Yeah.
On the flip side, could we put in being led by or sourced by a co-creative relationship with the land?
Mm.
I think co-creation would be something we would be seeking. And also like land connection or integration with nature. There are different ways to say it. It's usually good when you're sticky noting to just sticky note a bunch of them and then reorganize, and sometimes you rewrite them later. You know, you like write a bunch of them, put them together, and say, let's just call all of those this one and clean it up, which is like what the facilitator does. You can imagine if all of us were making sticky notes, we weren't limited by Anna writing them, we'd probably be able to throw a bunch of them on there. I think all of those go in the direction too.
I think actual regeneration of the earth would be more a behavior, I think, than on the bottom one, right? Yeah. Co-creation with the land.
Yeah, I would put into the behaviors we see is I'll practice wording it because I don't think I have the wording quite right yet, but is like deal making. But what I mean is, or deal flow, which is that resources move to where they're needed, that funders bring resources, that people are supported, that actions can be taken. I contrast this with the greenwashing kind of thing of, well, we say we're supporting the land, but really 70% is going into our pockets. You know, there's this sort of the way in which
resources flow.
Yeah, like resources flow to the ground or to the landscapes, if we were to put it in the language of the school. And it's demonstrable that you can see the resources flow to the landscapes, or else we're not serving our mission.
Mhm. Brad or Chad, I want to invite either of you if you have anything that you would like to share. Now that we've kind of gotten the flow of the matrix, as you can see, it's really very much about sorting is what we would focus on. So if you're thinking of a value or a behavior that you think is really important in the design school, we can sort it into the different categories along this matrix. But yeah, I'm interested to hear if you have something to put either on the toward or away side of the matrix.
Yeah, and some of mine have already been said. I have a couple of meta comments too, but I can hold those. I'd say in terms of the away, behaviors that erode trust.
What are some examples of behaviors that erode trust for you?
So this gets to the emotional or psychological flexibility. So reactive behaviors, ones that diminish others, at the disservice of truth, but also the capacity to like take in constructive criticism, or the incapacity for the other side of that. Yeah.
I might add to those like suspicion or doubting the intentions of others. Which again, there's a negative and positive reframe, so you could do the positive reframe on the other side, like trusting in the intentions of others.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is more on the inner side that can lead to some of those behaviors. So I think that's a really good thing. Because as you can see, as you are filling these up, we can almost think in terms of what is causing the behaviors to happen. So when we're thinking of behaviors that are, that diminish others, that are in disservice to the truth, or that incapacity to accept feedback, what are some of the thoughts and the emotions that are coming from the context of the situation that can lead to that? We can kind of take more of that causal approach rather than just thinking of it in terms of, that somebody has something wrong with them. We can get to sort of to the source of those behaviors. Brad, I was wondering if you would like to share too. Do you have anything that you would like to share? It's breaking up a little bit.
Text.
Can you hear me? Oh, maybe that's mine. Can you guys hear me? Can anybody else hear me?
Yeah, you're
we
fine.
Okay. So, sorry, Brad. I think you're
Oh, there he is.
coming back. Oh, we lost him. Okay.
One thing that was coming up for me was open-heartedness. Open-heartedness both towards each other and toward the effort as a whole. So not just open-mindedness towards this, all the newness that we're instigating and experiencing, but open-heartedness toward it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. I think one that takes us away, that's in the lower left, would be feeling unheard.
Mm.
Someone feels unheard, they may push for something to be heard, which can derail from purpose. So they can do other things too, but feeling unheard is something that, as a subjective experience that's not visible, can definitely undermine the group process and take us away from purpose.
And I don't know if you saw the things I put in chat, but
Oh,
yeah.
And another kind of behavior that we want less of would be like irrelevant content, spamming, basically things that are off of purpose because the purpose isn't clear or because someone doesn't know how to behave. That which clutters the space, which does, various things. That creates a sense of the space not being productive or not being useful, which can demotivate people. So I think those are behaviors we would see on the platform or in one of the Zoom calls. There'd be an equivalent of that would maybe not be spamming, but can have a similar harmful effect.
yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Joe. Because you can see that there's kind of almost like a spiraling effect, that the more people engage in the behaviors, so the feelings, the thoughts and feelings that get in the way of moving toward one, the way that this matrix is set up, it makes it seem like, so as you can see, there's a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. So the thoughts and feelings that hook and get in the way of moving towards your values can lead to the behaviors of the individual members. But the more our individual members engage in those behaviors, it also increases those feelings in the lower left. So it's like a spiral effect.
Yeah, and there's also those there are those behaviors that we take for granted. Well, people who may not be directly involved in, say, administration or operation may take for granted, and even those who do might not have it fully articulated. So like the less sexy things like like effective administration and operational management, something like that. And the flip side, that also shows up in under thoughts and feelings in terms of like awareness of the rules of the game or the protocols. So there's awareness, or you could say ignorance of like procedure, prosocial principles themselves, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Also like over criticalness. I don't know how would you say
Overly critical.
overly critical, like overly judgmental about something or critical about something. Yeah.
Another behavior I've seen is unhelpful suggestions, which is where someone makes a suggestion because they don't know enough about the context. So they don't realize they're cluttering the space with an unhelpful suggestion. That can undermine the creative flow of the group as well as the accumulation of good ideas.
Which is what Chad was just saying. Like
Yeah,
if
it's
they're
related.
ignorant of the context or
Yeah, that came to me when I heard what you were saying, Chad. I was thinking of it as just another Another one I would put on the upper right would be leaderful actions. Because I've been in contexts where leadership is actually shunned.
Hmm.
And so we want a context that celebrates leaderful actions. So like, wow, Gwen showed up leading. We're so happy she's leading. Thank you, Gwen. Instead of, is she doing a power grab? You know, that sort of a difference is a really big deal. So leaderful actions is what we want to see more of, meaning that we actually want to celebrate and encourage leaderful actions.
Mhm.
That makes me think of something of honoring of existing efforts. Like, because I feel like a big part of what we're doing is how do we interact with the existing landscape leaders, and how do we create pro-social connections and new mechanisms that recognize and augment existing beautiful efforts.
I like that.
Yeah, Claire and Brandon role modeled that really well in the Regenerate Cascadia info session they did last night, because I watched the recording of it. They're like, we want to help the local organizers to celebrate their local work, to continue and be more effective, to bring them resources. It was very much like a service-oriented mindset of celebrating and honoring what had come before, but not in a way that fell into dogma. It was quite the opposite. So maybe falling into dogma could be one of the ways.
Yeah, and speaking of religion,
My karma ran over your dogma.
Where do we put?
Yeah, where does
like-
that go in the
like
matrix?
highly appropriate jokes and then put Gwen next to
Yeah.
that.
Good
I'm
humor.
sorry, Chad, you were gonna say.
Religious, what are the rites and rituals, basically, for treating this as a sacred space? That gets to the honoring aspect of it.
Yeah, honoring of sacred space might be a positive way of saying that. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because that touches on a lot of things. Yeah.
It's
Or
almost like
invoking
honoring
sacred space.
the spiritual aspect. It's something Roberta talks about a lot, like sort of the foundational. Spiritual is such a word that's so controversial, or
Well, it's loaded because
loaded.
Yeah, there's something there. I think that the ritual aspect's important. It might not look like a ritual. So
You don't have coffee every morning. It's a ritual. Rituals can be really simple.
But there is something about the mind, body, spirit. It's like that's a thing. It's like it's an arena of our wholeness as human beings that I think we all realize is really important and nurturing and necessary for our well-being, and so honoring that as part of this process, having rituals that support it. I'm looking for that way to articulate it as well.
Like holism as a value, or
I was thinking of a way we could say a helpful and unhelpful behavior as a pair. Helpful behavior would be revealing connections, and an unhelpful behavior is fragmented actions. It's like we want to reveal the connections, whereas people can just go it alone and separate and create fragmentation. So I'm meaning it in that sense. We want less of fragmented actions and more of revealing connections.
Maybe honoring our spiritual nature. I don't know.
Yeah, I resonate with that, and I think it also depends on how it's determined.
yeah,
Like in a strict traditional Catholic setting versus say a neo-pagan or etc. It's just a way of saying it. We might hone it a little bit more to get at what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like I do think that like eco-spirituality would be in the values space of what we want more of, just like spirituality connected to nature.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So eco-spirituality can go there as
that one seems like
a
not,
principled thing.
not very controversial. Yeah,
That's not controversial in this community,
yeah,
because spirituality can mean a lot of things, but feeling that deeper connection to something bigger than ourselves, which is nature, would be widely shared.
mhm.
Yeah.
Um, hmm. Another is emergent leadership. That would be a positive behavior,
Mhm.
which is basically doing things that are timely and relevant rather than doing what's planned. It's like sort of throwing the plans out the window if the world changes. So there's something really important about how we do that.
Mm. Like going with the, well, I don't know, thinking of water like the flow of emergence. or-
Another thing we do is we dream big.
Mm.
I mean, we have shockingly sized dreams for most people. They're like, I can't imagine getting to school on time. And you're like, let's regenerate the Colorado River.
Yeah.
I'll never forget this the first time I saw that. And it didn't take long for me to like realize, oh yeah, that's what needs to happen. But I was just like, what the
That meeting, that was
Sorry, Gwen, I pushed that on you. That was my bad.
audacity. Brad just put audacity.
Audacity is a good one. Yeah, put audacity down there at the bottom right. We are audacious.
Yeah.
We celebrate audacious.
What else do we celebrate?
So another thing I think gets in the way is insecurity or timidness. To be more on the left, bottom left. We're like, we sort of like want to make timidness go away. We want to be like Brad, I was sort of thinking of you in a way when you were like, could I actually help organize Grand Junction? And we're like, yes, you can. We'll help you. We're like, we don't want to get stuck in the insecurity or the timidness. We want to cultivate the confidence. And so there's a way in which that is an obstacle to what we're trying to do. Sorry if I put you on the spot with that one, Brad, but I remember when you were questioning it and how beautiful it was when you rose up.
Well, you know, and I think I think what yeah, I'm just feeling like um the artfulness of being emergent, going what's in the moment, going with what's in your heart. But I'm also feeling a lot of like what's too far with that. So like how do you like where's the art of not being overplanned but not being too impulsive? And I don't know what the word or the what the pro-social behavior would be for that, because it's also well, on the one hand, encouraging somebody to step into the role that they're meant to do is good, but encouraging the wrong person to do that, so like how, yeah, how does this,
discernment is what I was saying too.
Discernment. That's a good value.
yeah,
But I'm
and
also,
how does yeah, go ahead, Joe.
no, just feeling what you're saying, Brad. I was like, there's something about, you have to go back to the Aladdin story of seeing the diamond in the rough. It's like, which is a kind of discernment. It's not seeing diamonds everywhere. It's seeing the diamond that's in the rough, which is like, it's not like we say everyone's a leader, although
Right.
you can have a culture that aspires for everyone to be leaders, but the word aspires is really important there. Yeah.
What about like, Brad, what you're saying kind of makes me think of yin and yang, like the balance of structure and flow, or the balance of yin and yang energies.
Yeah, contemplation and action. There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Benji said something the other day, and again, it's just wonderful to watch people's use of language in all this, because it's just so powerful. But I think he said, let me make a provocation, or let me, you know, so when, yeah, again, that when are you saying something that shuts somebody down, and when are you saying something that brings up a stronger reaction in that? Like, how do you, yeah, what's the language or the pro-social leadership?
For some
I
reason,
do like that discernment.
for some reason, you're making me think of my tipping points webinar that I gave, that somehow the reaction of people coming out of it is more deeply engaged, more sense of meaning and purpose. Like when that topic, it's like a fine line. I think I almost depressed the shit out of people, but there was something about it that seemed to have worked. There's like a fine line there. I'll do a little bit of that tomorrow with prosocial evolution.
It's like the balance of truth with kindness, with, you know, like truth and kindness. The balance of like being able to speak truth, but in a way that people can take in, or something.
Because it's the intention that's important. Like, are you provoking someone to open them and support them and inspire them, or are you trying to shut them down or scare them, or
Yeah, I think that giving and taking in is essential. And this is also what I hear in you, Gwen, is achieving a collective intelligence, an emergent collective intelligence.
Yeah.
It's about like creating the coherence that has the capacity to flow in a way that allows a higher order intelligence to emerge.
Yeah.
Yeah, another one I might put in the upper right is convene people in landscapes. So you can see the behavior of people convening in a landscape. Like what Brian and Susan do every time that Penny and I go there. They organize a whole series of events to convene people. And it's in the landscape, and it's a big part of how we serve the mission of the design school. Which of course doesn't happen just when I go there or Penny goes there. It's something that the design school is encouraging more of to happen.
Campfires.
Yeah, convening people on landscapes is an observable behavior.
Yeah. And I just wanted to speak to one thing that Brad was saying, because I think that that kind of that level of discernment that's so critical within prosocial. So as you've noticed, we've been sorting behaviors, sorting thoughts as things come up. When you get really good at psychological flexibility and using the matrix, especially if you're using it in therapy, it's recommended that you essentially visualize this matrix. And as you go throughout your day, when things happen, when you feel things, when you engage in things, you would sort it in the matrix. And that is brings you to this center here, where you're starting to notice the difference between them. Notice the difference between how it feels when you are engaging in over planning, or when you are engaging in fragmented actions that might temporarily mitigate some of these away feelings, but in the long run, it's not successful in moving you towards your values. So a lot of this is about living with the matrix and evaluating the outcomes of your actions. So sometimes it's not readily apparent when you are learning to discern these things, whether it falls on the left or the right. It really depends on what the outcomes are. And over the long term, when you're engaging in these behaviors, is it moving you towards your values, or is it only short-term mitigation of these negative feelings and behaviors? So I just wanted to speak to that I think that it's a learning experience, and all part of psychological flexibility is you become so grounded and mindful of your behaviors and your thoughts and your feelings that you become aware of those things, and you're able to make these judgments based on your past experiences on how you want to what behaviors you want to engage in, because you're finding, oh, when I'm engaging in leaderful actions or I'm celebrating the actions of others, that tends to move me closer towards my values.
Along those lines, I'd love to invite a specific nuance about creating a matrix like this, which is that it's easy to project the matrix onto others. Like we, and this collection of us just made this matrix for the design school. So we could say, this is the matrix for the design school, and then try and get people to conform to it. When there's actually a much more adept way of using it, which is we practice thinking and feeling in this way and bring coherence to our relational field by showing up with that sensibility, which you notice is different than saying, in our matrix, we did this. It might be, well, I remember in our matrix process, we talked about dogma and over planning. And I'm noticing in this moment, someone is shutting down into dogma and planning, and I can help them as a sensibility in the way the conversation flows. And so it's like the matrix is sort of an alive process of discernment. And then you sort of let the matrix itself fall away. You don't need the 4 quadrants, you don't need the details, but you have the sense making, the flexibility of continual sense making. And so I just wanted to name that we're creating a little pool of coherence among us, but there are like 140, 135 other members of the design school that aren't here right now. So we're not proscribing, we're not dictating what it is for everyone, even though it was, these are, this is the mission of the design school, was one of our prompts. But it's just a beautiful subtlety to hold that. To say, look, we're learning coherence together in a particular way that we will take out into the other relational spaces. And that noticing part is the mindfulness practice that's so powerful. Yeah, I love the matrix because I love to use it and then throw it away. And then keep using it, the practice of it. It's really powerful that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe, that just speaks a lot to, what I'm feeling like in my experience flying and, training for certain things. And then sometimes you're just in the moment and you do that other thing, right? And so, yeah, I can see this being a really good tool for me when I'm a little bit spun out to say, okay, drop back in, look at this, try to practice this, try to refer, and that's what I think this really speaks to what I've been asking for in terms of like mentorship and stuff, is just having like that cheat sheet, having that framework that's adaptable to each situation. So I'm getting a ton out of this.
Yeah, and I wonder if you might just speak a little bit to the kind of the ACBS kind of use of this, like the way that the ACT matrix has come into widespread practice in therapeutic and management frameworks. If you might speak, since I know that's more the space in which you've used it a lot, because this is an incredibly useful and highly valued tool that's used by thousands of practitioners. So, and I wonder if you might just speak to that a little bit, because that's a little bit different than the activity itself. It's one level removed, but it's a powerful bit of knowledge.
Yeah, and actually, so this is this Miro board, I won't show you the rest of it, is actually a Miro board that I use with my staff. That is just farther down the page, but so typically the ACT matrix is used in the individual sense. So what and you start with a question in the bottom right corner, or sometimes you'll see it in the top right corner. It doesn't really matter, except that you have one side that is those inner thoughts and feelings, things that can't be seen and that happen within you, and the other side is what people would see you doing, your behaviors, and then the toward and away, or the surviving and thriving sides. And you can start with what matters most to me as an individual, but you can also start this first question off with what matters most to me about this particular situation. Or you can start out with like one of the things that we use a lot with kids with autism who have a very difficult time taking the perspective of others is what matters most to your mom in this moment. What do you think? And then you start by listing that, and the subsequent questions are based on whatever this first question is. So what matters most to your mom in this moment? What thoughts and feelings do you think might get in the way of your mom? Like, so if it's you're having an argument with your mom, or your mom isn't letting you do something that you want to do, trying to have them take the perspective of the mother. What do you think matters most to your mother in this moment? Why she's not letting you eat Pop-Tarts for dinner? What thoughts and feelings might come up and get her hooked and move her away from those values, so what matters most to her is your health, your safety, your happiness. She gets frustrated, that might move her away. And when she's frustrated, you see her yelling, you see her grabbing the Pop-Tarts out of your hands and maybe engaging in something that is hurtful to you, or that you perceive as to be mean. But if she is trying to make you happy, healthy, safe, she would encourage you to eat a healthy meal. She would do all these things. So these are the different ways that we can use the matrix to guide some of these questions, whether it's personal sense making or perspective taking of others. And then the central point, that noticing the difference, is really focusing on taking a step back and kind of disconnecting yourself from everything that you're putting on the matrix. One of the things that it focuses on is separating yourself from your immediate emotions and how you immediately react to those emotions, and giving yourself some space to observe it objectively, as words on a page, things that you can think a little bit clearer because you're putting it on the page and you're reading it. It's not part of you. One of the things that they also focus on is, like, instead of saying like I am mad or I equal mad, it's I'm noticing that I am having the thought that I am mad, or that I'm having the feeling that I'm mad. You're breaking that that attachment to those emotions so that you can look at it objectively and then choose the behaviors that are most effective for you. So that's how we would use it in therapy. And you can apply that then to the group level, is what we do with the collective matrix.
Yeah, like I was first really exposed to it at an ACBS, a conference of the Association for Contextual Behavioral Science, where there are like 14,000 people at this big conference in Seattle. And I saw, a book table with like 500 different books about the ACT matrix. And I'm like, what the hell is this ACT matrix that so many people have developed so many uses for it? And it's because it's gets at really fundamental things, but you can be very creative in how you use it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a limiting tool at all. Although sometimes it seems like a limiting tool. But when you appreciate that how many ways people have used it, it's more how do you work with those phenomena of the lived experience. So that was what I've noticed, and how powerful it is.
One thing I would add, or just highlight, reiterate that you both said is it's like a living, breathing thing that you take into your life. Like I'm just thinking of when I was first using it, when I was in the prosocial facilitator training, and I had like a goal of, okay, I want to be more prosocial in groups. And what does that mean? That means I need to actually talk and express myself, and so then I would notice, like, the first layer of, why am I not saying something right now? This is like an example. And then it would like go deeper, and then it's actually because I'm afraid of this, and because I'm afraid of this, because it's like this living thing where I would start to reveal the layers of the fear or whatever was stopping me, and it went pretty deep if you keep it like alive. If I kept it alive, like just keep inquiring into like, I want to move towards this behavior, why am I not doing it? So that kind of living, breathing, I think that's so important for the matrix. Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad that we kind of so I think the way that I was anticipating to run this session changed a lot, but what I'm thinking is what we could do is for future, if we want to go through a core design principle, one of the things that we can do is we can start out by having this collective matrix of our general purpose, which we could start out all of our sessions with some sort of general purpose matrix or discussion, but moving into changing this first question into what matters most to us in regards to this situation or this core design principle. What matters most to us about fair and fast conflict resolution? And we can then start developing the barriers that we experience within effective conflict resolution, as well as what behaviors are most effective for us within conflict resolution. So that might be kind of a structure that we can use for future meetings. Brad?
Yeah, I really appreciate your time doing this, Anna. I'm just like, this really feels like something I can actually dive into and learn a bit more on. So I'd just be really excited to be able to learn on my own and bring more to the next meeting. The one thing that was kind of the burning thing in my mind right now was just, thinking about this and thinking about the beginning where, you're talking about if this is this like emergency management or is it, like planning? And like, has anybody overlaid this with the polyvagal map, right? Like, are we ventral, right? And then has somebody said something that's like pushed me over into parasympathetic, because I see that happening quite often in one of the groups that I'm in. Like, one person can just totally derail me. And so then how does that affect my matrix, right?
I'm not familiar with the map that you're talking about, but
I
okay. So maybe Penny, you could.
Penny's done a lot of work on this. Yeah. Do you want to speak to it then, Penny?
maybe I should teach polyvagal theory, huh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I would say that basically the way I would map it, Brad, would be to say that when we're triggered, the things on the left are our triggers. It's like when we get triggered, and I feel like I'm not being heard. I feel like I'm not being heard, let's say, and that's a trigger. Then how we act that out is, if we act that out in a not very positive way, is what shows up on the top there. So it's like looking at the triggers when we get triggered into a stress response of sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system. How do we behave? And everybody does that differently, based on their past and how they've managed. But that's what's going to show up on the left side here of the matrix.
And I just wanted to highlight this one thing, because it tends to be when we do this quickly, it tends to be that quote unquote negative behaviors end up on the left side. But we really want to get away from good and bad. Nothing's good and bad. More morality is just, it's all relative here. And instead of thinking of it in terms of what's good or bad, think of it what's workable. So the thoughts and feelings that you have in this bottom left column are very real and usually need to be dealt with in some way. You can't just always live on the right side of the matrix. So recognizing that these behaviors that are showing up in the left side are adaptable in a certain way in mitigating these away thoughts and feelings. But what you want to compare it to is, in the long run, how workable is it? So you can actually fill your upper left quadrant with coping strategies that are workable for you in the long run, and also meet the needs that you have in this bottom left-hand corner. So they're not all just negative behaviors.
Chad, I see your hand is up.
I do have a hand up. And to that point, Anna, that point about distinguishing between helpful and unhelpful behaviors in different contexts also says something about how this process could be used to map space or spaces and roles, because what might look like a contradiction between terms in one quadrant, for example, might actually just be speaking to that question of what's appropriate where. So not all behaviors in the leadership council are going to be the ones that should be being practiced in campfires, right? And some will, some won't. And those that are consistent across spaces, then they depict the backbone or the spine, right? That's holding everything together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a great point, Chad. One of the things too that we've said, again, the majority of my experience, I do have experience with the collective matrix, but I'd say that I am well trained in the standard individual matrix. And one of the things that comes from this is, depending on the context, you can have quote unquote conflicting matrices. So when you're thinking about your values as a career person or in your working life, a lot of the things that show up in that matrix might conflict with your values and what's in your matrix in your home life as a parent or as a sibling or as a friend. So you have a lot of these kind of interwoven matrices that it's super context dependent, hence why it's called contextual behavioral science. So
Yeah, and I think that's especially important for maintaining coherence.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these are going to be consistent across the design school, but as we grow, seeing what of those are needed to be practiced where is going to be really important, how they support each other.
Yeah, I'd love to speak into that for a moment, which is this, a lot of this is about adeptness and capacity. Just people practicing the ACT matrix or practicing Eleanor Ostrom's core design principles. They're practicing capacities of cooperation. And those practices increase psychological flexibility to know what is appropriate and adaptive in a given context, and to be able to shift behavior. In that, say, oh, in this context, I behave differently than in that context, because this is what's appropriate here. And that is an adeptness of prosociality. And so this is one of those inner parts of prosocial, is building the human capacities to participate in prosocial processes, which are capacities that are expressed in different ways in different moments. And I wanted to just connect this briefly as a teaser for the webinar tomorrow, because when I came up with the title for tomorrow's webinar, I actually thought I was going to talk more about this selection of inner sentiment and expression and the sort of inner semantic space of cultural evolution, which is one thing the ACT matrix helps you do, is helps you bring out different parts of yourself so that you're selecting the better you, perceived and interpreted by you, which is a cultural evolutionary process. But then I felt that would actually not make sense without showing how cooperation evolves within and between groups. So I ended up with more of an evolutionary cultural evolution talk with less of a behavioral evolution talk for tomorrow, which means you'll see less of this that we're talking about today in tomorrow's webinar, but you'll see the things that I'm talking about as patterns are what we just did in the last hour and a half, which is that we created a context in which particular behaviors, feelings, and expressions became more highly populated in the experience of the group, which is an evolutionary process. And that was a big insight of B.F. Skinner, and then later of Stephen Hayes, and then lots of people in between, and recognizing that the relational frames between different parts of yourself is actually a biological population that has evolutionary selection. So you as a living being are continually selecting different parts of yourself to express, and the ACT matrix helps make that visible so that it can be conscious evolution, that you can choose how to manage your own behavior, which is why contextual behavioral science works, and it's incredibly powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just want to recognize the time. So I would love, oh, and hello, Lean. I didn't realize that somebody else had joined us.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm very sorry, but I completely forgot this meeting, so I went for a walk by the sea. Yeah, so that's why I showed up so late.
Next time, invite us to take a walk with you by the sea. Jeez.
Yeah. It
That
was
sounds like a
beautiful
good
sunset
choice.
here.
But yeah, I would love to give everyone the opportunity to just do a checkout before we leave. Kind of let us know what you're taking away from this the last 5 minutes. And would anybody like to go first?
No, I can go first and say one thing I'm taking away from this is the deep importance of cultivating this as a sustained capacity with increasing numbers of members of the school. So feeling into how to build this as a body of practice within the design school that then can be taken into landscapes through members of the design school. And then whoever would like to go next, or I can pass it forward, either way.
I'll go.
Okay, so I'm going to pass it to Gwen. So perfect.
Is mind melding with you. One thing I'm taking away, and a lot, but in the charrettes that we've been doing, I think it would be really helpful to do, just a mini matrix on behaviors that people feel like would really support what we're trying to do, and just to start to get that conversation going as a mini practice in each of the charrettes. I think that would be really helpful, so I'm excited to do that and probably get some more help from you on that, Anna.
Would you like to pass it forward, Gwen?
Oh, I'll pass to Chad.
I'm thinking about how to keep up the practice in my own life here. Yeah, so observing how we went through is then informing or being a check on how I show up in other spaces. And to that end, will we have access to the Miro board or a copy of?
Yeah, I will
Yeah.
post this. When I post the recording, I'll post a picture of this Miro board. But what I want to do is I want to set up a Miro board page that everybody has access to on a regular basis, as well as have some sort of video tutorial on how to use and access Miro, so that people can just come in and add to it if they want to.
Yeah, and then my other thought would be about how to make this more available to everybody on a consistent basis, because there are only a few of us here right now. And I don't imagine that we can make requirements, but make it juicy enough that people will want to enter themselves into the process. Yeah. Pass it on to Penny.
And just so you know, I started the resources section today in this space, so for a recordings area, and then also I added your the thing you posted today, the Prosocial World resource hub. So I made it like a little resource, so we could start to do the Miro board and put that in there and everything, so it'll be easy for people to find. And I'm feeling like this was so good, I want to share it with everybody in the school somehow. So like speaking to what you're saying, Chad, like I want to highlight this maybe in school happenings and somehow keep inviting people into this space. And I'm just feeling excited and enlivened. So Brad, how about you?
I'm feeling really supported by this process, and I just wanted to name that I was dropping in and out with my connection and just my timing, and there was some real pro-social behavior that was modeled to not make me feel that I was disruptive, but to allow me to continue to be included. So I really wanted to just name that and thank you for that. And I'm sorry, I just have to take 1 second, like as a father, Joe. Yesterday, I saw some behavior that was like unbelievably pro-social, and it happened emergently with my kids and the neighbor kids. Both of my boys, 6 and 7, haven't taken training wheels off their bicycles. KJ and his brother Isaac were over. Ali was climbing up a basketball hoop, and he got them, and he encouraged KJ to climb up there with him. I was able to say what's dangerous, what's not. And then because KJ was riding the bike, Farhad rode his bike for the first time without training wheels, and then Ali rode his, and then he literally rode it down a hill through wet grass. And it was just like, as a father, it was just unbelievable. And at night, my son, Ali, is hyper competitive, and it's always been a sticking point between us, like since he was a year and a half old. We actually had a conversation about what healthy competitiveness was. It just, so I'm sorry it takes so much time, but there's just a lot of magic happening. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you should see how much my daughter loves to give gifts to people when she likes something. It's like, this is delicious. Let's give it to everyone. I'm like, kids are amazing. So yeah.
And Lean, I know that you weren't able to attend the full meeting, but we would love to hear your checkout as well.
Okay. What I have heard for the last 15-20 minutes makes me want to go again, because it's it's in my interest, and yeah, so I will look forward to hear the replay so I can catch up. And I don't know why there's no video. I'm on my phone. Maybe that's why I would like to show my face, but I can't. Yeah.
Yeah, there might be a little video button in the bottom. But yeah, I hope to see you again at another meeting, because I'm not sure if I've seen you before. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Should I pass it on to Gwen? Have you said something?
Yep, I think actually everybody has said something
Okay.
to me. So I'm also very happy that everybody was here who did come. And I know that it's a small group, but I also love small groups. I think that they're better than big groups personally. So I'm very glad that we were able to engage in this, and that everybody felt great about how it went over and that it was impactful. Thank you. And I hope everybody has a great Friday, and we'll see you all tomorrow for Joe's webinar.
Thanks, Anna. Bye, everyone. I gotta go run and pick up Elise.
Bye.
Bye.